know, same-sex marriage has been discussed and argued for a very long time. It has also been brought into court many times in the past. Some would say that is one of the most controversial topics to be brought up. Same-sex marriage was first legalized in Massachusetts in 2003. And throughout time, more and more states legalized it, leading up to the Obergefell and Hodges trial that took place June 26, 2015, which made it legal in all 50 states. The government shouldn't have legalized same-sex marriage because of these reasons I'll be informing you about today in my speech. Today I'll be informing you about why gay marriage shouldn't be legal. Some points I will be focusing on will be how same-sex marriage goes against legal definition of marriage, how it violates most religious, and also the mental effects it can have on a child, and also how homosexuality used to be a part of the mental illness list. And lastly, I will be sharing some of the counter-arguments against this position. The first point I will be touching on is how same-sex marriage goes against the legal definition of marriage, and how it can negatively affect a child. Same-sex marriage is known to be marriage between two people with of the same gender. The legal definition states marriage is a legal contract entered between a man and a woman intending to become husband and wife. Marriage creates a legal relationship between husband and wife with rights and obligations governed by law, stated by U.S. Legal. Stated by Stanley and Kurtz, a majority of the public opposes same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage also violates natural law. Marriage forever has always been between a man and a woman. I do not believe that marriage between two of the same sex is healthy for our society nor for a child that may be brought into the picture. I believe that it is unfair and unhealthy for a child to be raised by two parents of the same gender. As for a female raised away from a father, has a much higher risk of getting into sexual activity and teen pregnancy. Children who grow up without a mother are deprived of emotional security and unique advice that mothers provide, stated by Pro Con. A 2012 study by Mark Rigners, has a PhD associate professor of sociology at the University of Texas at Austin, found that children raised by parents who had same-sex relationships suffered more difficulties in life, including sexual abuse and unemployment later in life, than children raised by intact biological families. My second point I will be informing you is how homosexuality used to be on the mental illness list. Until 1973, homosexuality was on the American Psychiatric Association list of mental illness. When it was removed from the list, it was surrounded with controversy as the association was pressured with 2 years of protesting. Every time previous when an illness was removed, it was based on scientific discovery or breakthrough. However, in this case, homosexuality was only removed due to social pressure, leading to the conclusion that based on scientific evidence, it should still be considered a mental illness and should be treated by a psychiatrist. Therefore, we should legally and morally obligated to make same-sex marriage illegal in order to prevent the promotion of a mental illness. Getting into my last and one of the most very important points is why we should ban same-sex marriage, is I want to inform you about the religious aspect. One of the most important reasons behind the ban of same-sex marriage is that it offends God, and many who professes to love God must oppose same-sex marriage. I'm sure most of you in this class are familiar with what a sin is. A sin against God is. If not, a sin against God is a transgression of God's law, and that is read from the book of John 3:4, which means to go against. Right out of the book of Genesis, God created man in his image. In the divine image he created him. Male and female to be created. God blessed them, saying, "Be fertile and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it." That's read from the book of Genesis 1:28. A story of Sodom and Gomorrah who were punished for the sin of homosexuality. Counter-arguments can be however, all of these facts I have stated, there are many counter-arguments for this topic. Right now, I will share some of what I think are some very valid points. One of the most important ones is that denying someone an option to marry is discrimination, and it creates a second class of citizen. Another valid counter-argument is that obviously it has been taken off the mental illness list, therefore you can no longer call homosexuality a mental illness. One other counter-argument I found was that gay marriage can also bring financial gain to not only the state and local government, but the federal government. Thank you for listening to my speech. This is why I think that the court case should be overruled. I will go over and recap the main points I hit. For the first point, I went over how same-sex marriage goes against the natural law and governed law, and how it can also negatively affect a child. Secondly, I went over how homosexuality used to be on the mental illness list. Therefore, we should not allow the marriage of same sex. Lastly, I touched on how it offends God and how he made us to be fertile with our significant others as in male and female. As well, he gave us the power to reproduce, as he said, as he blessed us to. That will wrap up my speech. Thank you for listening.
So I will be arguing for that the Obergefell versus Hodges court case was rightfully ruled. I'm sure we are all aware of the world that we live in. Homosexuality is an accepted practice in today's society, and it is something that is accepted by the majority of individuals in this country. However, until just recently, homosexuals were limited in their freedoms that they could exercise. They were discriminated against, and unlike other citizens, they were unable to be officially engaged in marriage. However, whether or not you agree with the idea of a homosexual relationship, the federal or state government doesn't have any right to say that the two citizens of the same sex cannot get married in any state. Doing so enforces an outdated and discriminatory idea of sexual relations in this country, as well as infringing upon the personal freedoms of LGBT citizens in this great country. My first point is that it infringes upon the rights of LGBT citizens. This country was founded on the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that was in the Declaration of Independence, and the 14th Amendment protects these ideas. It keeps the government, federal or state, from creating or enforcing laws that limit the rights of its citizens, or as well as deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, or deny anyone equal protection of its laws. So essentially, the 14th Amendment is saying that the federal or state government cannot infringe upon the given rights of its citizens at any point in time. Now, you might be thinking that there's not an amendment that says explicitly that citizens have the right to marry whoever they choose. However, it is a fundamental right, and according to Cornell's Law School Online Encyclopedia, the right to marry is a fundamental right, meaning that although it isn't explicitly stated in the Constitution, it is still recognized as a right of the citizens of the United States, and it is under the jurisdiction of the 14th Amendment. Other examples of fundamental rights are the right to bear children and the right of interstate travel. So denying anyone a fundamental right is a direct violation of the Constitution, and this was the reasoning why the Obergefell versus Hodges case is what it was. According to Doug Kendall and Ela Shapiro of the Cato Institute, this was key in the Obergefell versus Hodges case because the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment was used to declare the act of states not issuing marriage license to same-sex couples unconstitutional. Another argument I would use to approve the legality of same-sex marriage is how marriage has changed over the past 100 years, and how the old definition of marriage is now outdated and in need of redefining. Obviously, things change over time. Society is different now than it was 100 years ago, with advances in technology, education, and social norms. Many things that were normal to do and think 100 years ago are now considered deviant today. I'll make an example that would be racism 100 years ago. We had Jim Crow laws, we had segregation 100 years ago. But now, in our society, that has changed. We don't think like that. We don't approve of those kinds of actions. So wouldn't it make sense for the ideals of marriage to change as well? Divorce rates have increased drastically, as well as the number of marriages in this country have decreased. The typical nuclear family has now become almost unusual. According to David Pompano in his article, American Family Decline, a review and appraisal, Americans are now having, as percentage of population-wise, less and less kids, which indicates that partners now aren't as concerned with procreation than they are with other aspects of their relationship. In her article, The New Fragility of Marriage, Stephanie Coots tells us now that new couples aren't as concerned with having children as they used to be. Instead, they would rather grow their relationship and focus on other goals that they have, such as financial stability, personal experiences like traveling, than they would starting a family. I can see that in my own family. I have 3 cousins on both sides of my family that are in their upper 20s, lower 30s, have been married for 5 to 6 years and don't have any plans of having children at this point in time, because they would rather focus on their financial stability and traveling and growing their own relationship with their spouse. So is it really that difficult to believe that someone may decide to choose a same-sex partner, even if they can't bear children? Will they choose that partner instead to try and grow a better relationship with that person? Additionally, there is an idea that there is a gay agenda trying to destroy the idea and sanctity of marriage. However, in his TED Talk, L.Z. Granderson, a CNN columnist, an ESPN sports reporter, and a prominent voice in the gay community, explains that this couldn't be farther from the truth. He explains that simply homosexuals want nothing more than to express themselves freely as gay, and they want to be equal with heterosexuals. They do all the same things, they have all the same wants and needs. They just want to be officially recognized by the government as legally married so that they can have all the same benefits that heterosexuals do. So in those 2 arguments, I explained to everyone the reasoning why the result of the Obergefell versus Hodges case was what it was, and I explained a common misconception many people have about homosexuals. For my next point, I'm just going to simply explain my own personal view and the reasoning behind it, of my opinion on gay marriage. My view on gay marriage really stems from my own idea of what being an American means. I always remember when my U.S. history teacher explained to us that we are all entitled to our own pursuit of happiness. That's the opportunity that being a citizen in this country gives us. That was the desire of the founding fathers when they drew up the framework of this nation. However, you are not allowed to interfere with someone else's pursuit of happiness. As an American, shouldn't you respect your fellow Americans' dream and their wishes? Everyone's dream is different. We have 15 kids in this classroom. I'm sure we have all drastically different goals and aspirations in life. Personally, I don't really care what your dream is. But I will respect it as long as you respect mine. It tears me up when I see fellow Americans belittling each other and pulling each other down and preventing each other from reaching their dream. The greatest tragedy in this country is when someone is never given the opportunity to properly pursue their dream. Whether that's winning a Heisman Trophy, a Nobel Prize, or just something like financial stability and having a family, or just marrying the person you love. Our founding fathers founded this country so that we would have the opportunity to chase that dream no matter what it is. Now here's some justifications people use for keeping homosexual citizens of our country from achieving their dream. Some people argue that homosexuality is just a big hoax, that there's no reason in nature for 2 members of the same sex to engage in a sexual relationship when there's no possibility of reproduction. You go next slide. That is true for other animals in the natural world, like this dog. There is no reason for 2 male dogs to have a sexual relationship. However, we are human. We have a cognitive ability that dwarfs all other animals in the animal kingdom. You put a man on the moon, and our lives are just so much more complex than these simple creatures. We're concerned with so much more than where's my next meal and how can I ensure the survival of my species. So why would we try and take these simplistic laws that we've derived from the behavior of animals and try to apply them to something as complex as our human consciousness? The answer is that we just shouldn't. Additionally, many people use religious reasons for arguing against gay marriage. This is clearly wrong and unfair and undermines some basic principles this country was founded on. The First Amendment clearly states that there is a separation of church and state in this country, and this means that there will not be any laws implemented that enforces a religious bias onto our citizens. Thus, any law or ruling with any religious bias in it shall be deemed unconstitutional, and it is important that when you're considering this case, you cannot allow a religious bias into your head. That is my argument for why gay marriage should be and rightfully is legal in the United States of America, and why you should approve of this court ruling. I would encourage you all to go out and do your own research and formulate your own opinions, because I assure you, you will hear this debate again, and there will probably be more legal action taken in the near future. Does anybody have any comments right now before we get into the questions? So first question, what do you think is the most important piece of evidence you hold in formulating opinion on gay marriage? Yeah.
I think mine is like depending on how close you are with that person. It depends on like your opinion on it. Like if you don't know that there's like to really care about it.
Like if you don't know a gay person?
Like if you like see like just like a gay couple on the street, you're just like, it doesn't bother me. But it's like someone that you're close with, like
It's
it can
different.
change your opinion on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. For the second question, God, I'm always terrible. Should
Obergefell versus Hodges.
be overturned?
These are some sensitive questions, man.
Do we have any like
I mean, it's not like,
any ideas that we didn't bring up that may play in that court case? Guess not. What was your stance on gay marriage before you entered the classroom today?
My stance was that like I'm perfectly fine with it, no matter if I know the person or not. And like through this speech, it hasn't changed my opinion. I'm still perfectly fine.
Did you have anything?
Yeah, I agree with her.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Like I don't really like seeing it. Like, I'm also like the same way. Like, I don't like seeing a heterosexual just like being really intimate right in front of me. So like, it kind of goes both ways. It makes you feel uncomfortable, even if it's a heterosexual or homosexual.
Okay. Do you feel like homosexuality is accepted today in today's society, or?
50-50.
Yeah, it's like you got people like you, and then you got people like him. So it's like it kind of tells you right there. Some people are for it, and some people aren't.
sorry, I have to research it, man.
No, he's doing good.
Should homosexuality be an accepted practice in today's society?
I mean, I think it should be, but will it ever probably be fully accepted by everyone? No.
Right.
Like it should be, like people are gonna love who they love.
Right, exactly.
That's fair.
I drew a lot of comparisons to like the civil rights movement, like when I was like doing research on this. Like, I'm sure like back then they were like, oh, like will African Americans ever be fully accepted? Like, now I feel like they are. So maybe by the end of our lifetime we'll see that happen.